You know, when you think of a record in not just bass fishing, but in any sport that stands for 50 years, it's, you know, it's absolutely remarkable. But when it is in the sport of bass fishing, where we have incredible, mind-boggling technological turnarounds and breakthroughs with every passing decade, every passing year, you're talking about the stuff of legends. And that legend, of course, who I'm talking about is Blake Honeycutt. And that record, of course, the all-time heaviest winning weight in a B.A.S.S tournament, 138 pounds and 6 ounces. And yes, it was the days of the 15-fish limit. But bear in mind, that tournament was not, it was a Eufaula National back in 1969. It was not a 4-day event, but a 3-day event. 138 pounds and 6 ounces, just mind-boggling. Absolutely remarkable, never will be broken. We call him one of the fathers of structure fishing. Some of them call him one of the sons of structure fishing because he was a disciple of Buck Perry, helped him bring out his famous Spoonplugs. We know him as also as the man who partnered with Tom Mann and Yank to launch Humminbird, and we know him for so many other reasons. We talk about him to this day so very much, but right now we know him as the newest inductee to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. Let's bring him up here. Can't wait to hear from Blake Honeycutt. Blake, I promised to get you some water, and I failed, but you got your own water. So.
Thank you so much, Mike. Wow, what an exciting night. I can't, you know, I received a letter in the mail that said I was going to be inducted into this Hall of Fame. And it was a big surprise and a huge honor. And I thank all who helped bring this to a conclusion. I thought it might be appropriate to kind of start from the first of, excuse me, my telephone's ringing. That's my daughter. Anyway, I think I was about, I think I was about 8 years old when my parents presented me with a reel and rod that I'd been asking for since I could remember. And it was a 4-foot-long, all-steel, octagon-shaped rod by True Temper. On the reel seat was a Fluger. No. Anyway, it was a nice reel. To me, it was the only reel I ever had that Dad gave me. So anyway, he took a galvanized peck bucket, took me out in the backyard, and he set that bucket down. And then he took a piece of stove wood. We had a wood stove back then. And he laid it down here, and he said, now, son, when you can take that reel and rod, and it was a long way off, he said, when you can hit that bucket 4 out of 5 times, I'm going to take you in the boat. It didn't take me too long. Anyway, our bass boat consisted, you had to make it yourself. There wasn't such a thing as a bass boat. You go to the lumber yard and buy 2 pieces of cypress about 16 inches high, a bunch of little old boards about this long, and you built that boat out in the backyard or in your barn entry. And you took it to the lake, chained it, because if you didn't chain it, next time you went, it'd be gone. So that's what we fished out of. And my life jacket was what my daddy called a cow rope. That was a piece of rope about big as my thumb that we used to stake our milk cow out in the yard while she was grazing. That was our life jacket. Our trolling motor was this. We had a black guy that did all the rowing for us, and he loved to do it. He was sick one time and couldn't do it, so we got one of the electrician helpers from the shop there, and he'd never been in a boat, and he wasn't very good at rowing, but every time Dad would catch a big fish, he'd say, clear the boat. And what he really meant was get the boat out away from the bank. So he got into a good-sized fish, and he said, clear the boat, and poor old Earl, he didn't, what's going on? He said, I said to clear this boat. Well, Earl, he jumped up off of the rear seat and grabbed the gas can and Dad's tackle box, and out in the lake he went. It wasn't a very pleasant afternoon after that. But anyway, jump forward probably around 6, 7 years, and fishing kind of went by the wayside for me because I was more interested in perfume and car fumes and that sort of social thing. And we had a golf course, and where we lived was a lot of hills. Had a golf course, and it was customary for a bunch of us young people to meet out there if we got a good snow to sled. And at the bottom of this hill was a ditch about, I don't know, 12 or 15 feet wide, about 8 or 10 feet deep with a little creek in it running by. So I was going down the hill, and I glanced over, and here was another sled. And the footbridge across that ditch wasn't but about that wide. So I wound up in the creek, and as I was trying to get out of the creek, this little sweet girl reached her hand down and said, "Here, I'll help you." I said, "Okay." So anyway, we walked back up, and I asked her, I said, "Would you like to go get a cheeseburger?" Because I kind of liked the way she talked and the way she smelled, had on some nice perfume. And so we did, and that was the beginning of a magnificent relationship. 65 years this lasted. But she was a magnificent engineer for the domestic duties, and if she hadn't have been, I couldn't have pursued some other activities that led me partly to here. You know, she hauled the kids to ballet and piano, and I had to go to them recitals, and they were so boring. But in the ball games for the boys, and it was just a constant moving in the car back and forth. But Maddie's a one heck of a fisherman. She beat the socks off of me. We were out fishing one day trolling. This is back years ago. She said, "Whoa, I'm hung up." And I saw that rod doing that, you know. And I said, "Yeah, you're hung all right." Well, we landed the fish, and it's 9 3/4 pound bass. I never caught a fish that big. Well, it's probably, I don't know, some years after that, we were out fishing, and that same story. I'm hung up. And I saw that rod. I said, "You just start winding." That weighed 12 pounds and 12 ounces out of our local lake. I've never been able to beat that record. I have fished so hard. Because I've heard that story. Don't ask her about it, or she'll bend your ear. Maddie, you're a great partner. Thank you. Well, in the contracting business, my dad got ill, and he wanted me to come and manage the contracting business, and he wanted to fish at Sandy Cooper too. I'll come to find out later. So I did, and we were heavy in cotton mill and furniture factory wiring and service. And I realized pretty soon, hey, we got to diversify. So I'd go out in neighboring neighborhoods and even in our area and solicit new customers. Well, one day I was down about 20 miles from home, and I was about out of gas, so I whipped in this little service station. And I heard an outboard motor running. And I had my own boat then, too. So I went over, it's a 2-bay service station, typical old-timey service station. And they had a 10-horsepower Mercury set up in a 55-gallon drum, running it and tuning it. Now, also in that same bay was what they called a Class D utility race boat, which was about 14, maybe 14 feet long and about that wide, and a hydroplane, a little old short thing, no longer on this table. So I got to hang around with them guys and learned a whole lot about boat setups. And got a local guy to build me a plywood boat, a 15-foot plywood boat that I could scull with one paddle and use my fly rod. Man, I wore them bass out sitting on that bow. Had a 7.5 horsepower Martin. Probably most of y'all never heard of that engine. But anyway, things went on, and we wouldn't fish in the summertime because the theory of all the older fishermen is you can't catch any bass in the summertime because it's too hot and they won't bite. Well, I'd heard of this fellow called Buck Perry who was catching the heck out of them in the summertime. So I made it my business to look him up. And I'd hang around at his place at night, and he was such a genuine man. One day he said, "Would you like to come to work for me?" I said, "Could we start in the morning?" And so anyway, I was fortunate enough to spend 1 year with that genius. I done everything, stamped out the spoon plugs, buffed them, cleaned them. I didn't do the paint. Miss Jetty did that in a little spray booth. But I ringed them and hooked them and packed them. And Buck and I'd go fishing a couple times a month. And he taught me so much about fishing, about deep structural fishing. I was so fortunate to be able to spend that time with him. And one day I went home for lunch, and Maddie said, "Here's a letter you need to look at. Do you know this fella?" And I looked at it, and I said, "No, I don't know him, but he's putting all kind of accolades in that letter about me and my fishing, and I don't think all of it, maybe it was exactly the way it was, but it sounded pretty good." And I said, "Well, we might as well load up all the kids and the boat and take off to Eufaula and fish that tournament." So we did, and I had these guys that was building the hydroplane and the Class D racer started a little glass manufacturing company called Dixie Boat Company. And they done very well in ski boats. Had a nice little 16-foot open fishing boat. And I had a 40-horse tiller Mercury on the back of it. We would pull up Eufaula. And I had me a bucket full of spoon plugs. And I found it right quick. Eufaula and spoon plugs don't mix. Too many hang-ups. And in 2 days, my spoon plug was all gone. So anyway, Rodney, my oldest son, who's here with us, got paired with John Powell, and that's history. Rodney caught the biggest fish. And I don't know how many years that stood, but a long time. Caught it, and it's really funny to hear John tell that story. Caught it using a buggy whip spinning rod, 10-pound test mono. And John said that fish, and they were fishing stick-ups, pine stick-up trees or bushes. He said that fish run through 20 bushes, and then it come right back out. And I think that bass weighed about 9 3/4. Is that right? So anyway, I decided right quick that we needed to regroup. So next year, we went back and we were better prepared. I took Rodney and 3 of his school buddies who fished together some, 2 cars and 2 boats, and down there we went. Well, one of Rodney's friends and I were pre-fishing, and we were fishing along a creek line, and I caught one about 6, and Mike, that was his name, he caught one about 6. He threw right back, caught one about 8, and he said, "Oh my goodness, Mr. Honeycutt, don't make me throw this one back." So I'll let him keep it. And I spent the next 2 days sweating that place out, and it was so hot. But nobody else found that place. And that's where all those fish came from. They were all in an underwater bush, kind of like crows sitting in a tree. So that's how that tournament came about. And then also, that's where I met Tom Mann. And we got to be good friends. And sometime after that, Tom called me up and said, "You know what? Both of us had green boxes. And we had experimented with them and played with them. And the only time you could really get any benefit was if you didn't have your trolling motor or your outboard running. Otherwise, the whole dial just looked like a Christmas tree. He said, we got a fellow down here that's x-ray technician in the hospital, and he has developed a noise rejection circuit. I want you to come down here and let's talk about it. So I did. Went out on the lake and saw a demo. I said, Tom, and this was incorporated into Heath kits. Back then, I don't know if you can buy them now. Back then, the Heath kit company was big and all kind of kits. So we decided we'd just march up to the bank and borrow some capital money, and we'd start in the business, depth finder business. Tom named it the Humminbird. And I said, that's a doggone good name. That's fine with me. So Tom put $5,000 in the company, and I put $5,000 in the company. We borrowed the money. And there was a local industrialist, I can't remember his name. I think his first name was Bob. I think he put $2,000 in. So the word got out, and we had hired some local ladies to put them together, the Heath kids. We were selling Heath kits right and left. I had me a white Ranger with a burgundy carpet in it, and Humminbird rode on the side of that boat. I went to all the bass clubs and tournaments, and that was the center of attention. We sold a lot of Ranger boats, a lot of Humminbirds. Well, Tom called me up one day and said, these fellows want to buy us out, so we decided to do that. Now to get on another media venue, I owe a lot of what I accomplished to the media. And I can't remember them all. There's Bob Cobb, Bodie McDowell from Greensboro, Daily News, Tom Higgins from the Charlotte Observer. Where is he? Anyway, they really did do a great favor for me. Without them, I don't think I would have done what I did. But also another fella, and he's in this room, who kind of gave me a boost. He called me up one day and he said, Blake, I'd like to make a film with you. And this was after the Eufaula tournament. I said, okay, come on. So he did. We went up to Bugs Island Lake, and it was high and muddy and cold. We caught one bass first day. Decided to regroup. We did. We went to Smith Mountain Lake and had a phenomenal 2 days fishing trip. He taught me how to use a single spin spider. I'd never seen one of those. He taught me how to use a twin spin spinnerbait, running it through treetops. Jerry McGinnis. Jerry, thank you so much. It's hard to separate the next two guys that made a great contribution. Ray Scott, as everybody knows, pretty well started this thing. He had a great vision. We had the don't kill your catch, peg a polluter, safety kill switches, just a lot of things that he did for us, and I thank you, Ray Scott. Another man, I had gone to fish the Jasper, Alabama tournament on Smith Lake, and I wheeled up behind the Holiday Inn with my competitive boat. I didn't know this man then, and parked it right in beside of him, and this tall, lanky fellow was standing there, and I got out, and we started a conversation. And I don't know, sometime shortly thereafter, I asked him, I said, Forrest, have you got a sales rep on the East Coast? He said, no. I said, well, I'd like to try it. So we worked out the details, didn't put anything on paper, done this number here in shape. And that's when I went to work as a sales rep for Ranger Boats. I had 20 great years. I had the privilege to know Forrest and Nana as my friends, to be able to be in their house. And you know something? The Colonel would have done much better if he had had Nina Wood's chicken recipe. Best, oh, good chicken, man. And Forrest, he was always the same, steady, friendly, God-fearing, hard-working, great American. Thank you, Forrest, for that, Nina. So that kind of, I could talk for 2 hours, but I think I will conclude there and say thank you. So good to be here. And as my favorite old comedian used to close his show, may God bless.